Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. I'm Ivanka Majic.
And my name is Michael Forrest.
Hello, Michael Forrest.
But what are we talking about this week?
We're talking about health, how to have it, keep it, what happens when you lose it, how we feel about it, the different ways of thinking about it. I've got various thoughts on the subject.
Well, it sounds like it. Well, shall we start? How was your week, Ivanka?
My week was very good, I think. Yes.
Week was you were on another podcast.
I was
moonlighting.
I was moonlighting on another podcast, which I was quite pleased with. I listened to it. I enjoyed it. It's called Ivanka Meets Stalin. The podcast was The World in Words with Patrick Cox. And it made me think, it made me smile, and so
it was
I enjoyed
very much about you, wasn't it?
It was. I was surprised about how much it was about me, but you know, I'm beginning to accept that I enjoy speaking to recordings. That I enjoy being recorded while speaking. That I enjoy broadcasting my opinions. And I'm willing to defend my opinions. How about that?
Yeah, good. Well, I've known that about myself for a while, but I've always tried to be very sort of cagey about being explicit about anything. So that's why this podcast is a lovely change for me. I just say stuff in words and try and explain it rather than embedding it into a line of a song somewhere and expecting anyone to realise what it means. And some of these views need quite a lot of explanation. So, you know, long form speech-based medium seems to be the way forward.
How was your week?
How was my week? Thanks for asking. I've just been working a lot, but I've been hanging out with the client this week in a multi-billionaire's penthouse in Kensington, which was very nice. I described it as beyond aspirational.
So you've gone up from billionaire to multi-billionaire.
Yeah, well, still South African, but there's a picture of this guy with Robert De Niro, Muhammad Ali, and Nelson Mandela just hanging out. So, it's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
And it sort of all went very smoothly. I presented to lots of people who have lots of opinions, and I also had a real several hour induction into the intricacies of the blockchain and Bitcoin as well. So I'm feeling more or less like I understand it, and almost like maybe I could explain it, although finding a straightforward way to explain it. I was saying to the guy, the expert, can we just have he says, this is usually a 3-day course. And I said, well, can we just have the 20-minute version? And then he sort of got into it and he sort of was rushing through his thing. And then by about 2 hours in, I was like, I'm really sorry.
There is no 20-minute
I suggested that you would be able to do that in 20 minutes because it's a lot. It's an awful lot. But I also, saw some very interesting stuff about something that I thought would be a barrier to sort of growth for Bitcoin, being it's a bit slow. So you actually do have to wait kind of half an hour to be sure that that you've actually spent the money, which in a coffee shop is perhaps a little impractical. But it's got some interesting things that work within. So they're coming up with clever ideas of what you can do without having to hit the blockchain every time. So you could have instant payments and that sounds like it can really grow. Anyway, so I learned a lot about Bitcoin this week. I was pleased I successfully did some work and also had my video shoot last week, which went very well. It was quite I'm actually really looking forward to editing that up and sharing that with everyone, because I made an alien that when you hold its hands it sort of glows, and depending on which hand it glows, sort of good or evil.
Thinking about health. So
what are the components of health? There's longevity. There's quality
Yes.
of life.
Yeah. There's-
There's that. There's that feeling good and not feeling bad, I suppose, thing.
Yeah. I think there's the sort of physical health and mental health, which I don't
Yes,
think
there's-
are
yeah.
indistinguishable. For me personally,
Mm.
when I'm mentally unwell, I'm physically unwell. Hence things like hives. I think there is the I don't know if this is true of the entire Balkans, but certainly the Herzegovina bit of the Balkans have a very as long as everyone's healthy kind of thing. And my father was very big on, as long as you're healthy, you can deal with problems in life. But once you've lost your health, you're a bit screwed. Which I think is true.
And sometimes I think because I feel healthy now, I sort of think I'm gonna be healthy forever. But there's always that, if it just caught you out.
Yes.
You have one experience where you forget you ate some beetroot and it can all go crumbling away, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die today. Like,
there is that thing as well about invincibility that I certainly had, and I'm sure many of us do, when we're young, smoking, drinking, doing all sorts of things. Yes, I am invincible. I can lift things, I can run places, I can do everything. And then, so for me, my wake up call to the fact that I was not invincible was my back going very wrong when I was 33. So
what happened? Was it something preventable, or was it,
well, that's debatable. I had a couple of protruding discs that gave me very bad sciatica and numbness in one of my legs. And so on my 33rd birthday, I was talking to a neurosurgeon who said, basically, you've got to try and stay away from me for as long as possible. So go and do, don't run loads, don't lift anything heavier than 15 kilos, do things like Pilates and yoga, and don't get fat. And he said, then you should be able to stay mobile. It's all about mobility and an absence of pain.
I had a housemate who probably in his sort of late 20s, early 30s, put his back out by trying to drill a hole with one of those kind of cordless screwdrivers, and just kind of like just did something wrong and just had a bad back forever. And I've always been like, I'm always kind of paranoid that I'm just gonna don't do that thing where because then you've just got a bad back forever, right? That's it. It's all over.
It's not quite all over, Michael.
Okay.
I've always been fit in. There's a couple of things about the bad back situation. So there is a lot of prevention and looking after yourself that you can do. In my experience, when you hear people going on about their bad backs, and yet they remain overweight and they still don't walk anywhere, and those kind of things, I find it just a little bit difficult to be very sympathetic. Like, come on, you've got to help yourself a little bit here. Equally, what happens now to me when my back does quote unquote go, which basically means goes into spasm and I can't really walk, and the pain makes me almost have a panic attack. But I kind of know how to get out of it now. I know what exercises I need to do. I know what the approach to take, what drugs I should take, why I need to take sort of, for example, strong painkillers, because I can get back to normal in a couple of days by taking strong painkillers and not just walking around like Groucho Marx crying.
Lord.
Well, the problem about acute pain is that in the moment when I experience acute pain, there's this, oh my God, it's never going to go. This is now my life.
Yeah.
Will it go? How am I going to? And that's what creates the and makes the psychology of it harder.
So would you say this has been your most intense source of the pain, in pain-wise? Like, is that the worst thing you've had?
Yes, it would be my back. And that's, and I have given birth to a child. So, but that's where I think you can't separate mental from physical, because in the subject, on the subject of pain and childbirth, it is such a different experience that has an end. Yeah. At some point, you're going to have a baby and then it's going to be over. Yeah. And so it has an end. So psychologically, it's a very, very different experience of pain. And your body is just, your nature's made it so it floods you with some feel-good stuff at the same time. But having debilitating physical pain due to some sort of injury, or your body just not doing what you want it to do or think it should do, that psychologically is much harder to deal with. And accepting that some things you just can't do anymore. Like
pain doesn't exist independently of what the meaning of that pain is, or you imagine it is. It's sort of like a sudden small pain that you can't explain is much worse than a kind of, I know, well, like, you eat a chili and you're sort of like, this hurts a lot, but I know it's fine. So it's a completely different thing to, I don't know what's going on and it hurts. Well, I was going to say my worst pain.
Yeah.
So this is another sort of like problematic early experience, but I kind of want to say it on the podcast, but like you might have to, I don't know, it's not the easiest thing to hear about. But I had, when I was like 7 years old, I experienced a testicular torsion.
Oh, what is that?
Which manifests as, it's a bit achy down there. Like I've just been sort of kicked, it's getting more intense. Oh my God, it's not stopping getting more intense. Oh my God, I'm crying for my life for half an hour as I'm kind of rushed to a doctor. Just absolutely you don't know what's going on, and it just I can't even describe it. And that happened to me on sort of like 2 consecutive bonfire nights. So like it happened once, and then we sort of went in, and then like it happened again the next year, and I had to have the sort of operation and to kind of stop it. So basically, what's happening is it's twisting around on its wire, and just gradually twisting around more and more, and just kind of increasing this pain. That's probably not something people want to listen to. So I promise I'll stop kind of trying to make you imagine it now. But yeah, that was that's another like, okay, I cannot control anything. Anything horrible can happen at any moment experience. I didn't fall over. I didn't do anything. It just like suddenly I'm being subjected to like the most horrible pain in the world, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't even talk. Like, but it was quite nice that I at least got a bit of attention.
Oh, you are so needy.
Well, no, because I didn't get any special treatment ever. So, it was the one time, I was in hospital and had this thing that I actually sort of bought some, like a fizzy drink, and brought some books, and not all of my siblings had to be bought an identical value of books.
Equality is always a bit of a pain, isn't it?
Yeah, so, that's why I want to be special now. I don't want to have the same as 6 other people. I want me just to have something for me, and not anyone else. Yeah.
The neck and shoulder thing I had last week, which I still have a bit, but it's not as bad. That's pretty. The actual. It's the first time in a long time I've not been able to breathe my way out of. Like when it's being manipulated, I was like, that is horrible pain. I don't know, that implies there's such a thing as good pain. Sort of the pain of maybe, without going too kinky, maybe the pain of exercise. There's lots of people who enjoy pain.
Well, I'm constantly in a state of not being able to sit down easily recently, but it's from pounding at the gym, you know? It's from being pushed by the trainers at the gym, like, do this, but then I'm like, ow, hurts to stand up. But they're doing, you know, I trust them to do a good job. Although Shaz she's been in a lot of pain this week because of her sort of shitty yoga class being oversubscribed, and she's like in the warm downs did something and was in intense pain, and like there's no one even there to, the next class is coming and no one even there to help, so I'm sort of cross about that.
Her shitty yoga class.
Well, it sounds like you know, if they're not gonna look after you and stop you getting injured, then you know we've got to find a better one.
Yes,
you need to sort of trust that person who's training you to, you know, not injure you, or you know, that's the worst thing they can do, really.
I go through phases of being interested in this, and I've done plenty of yoga, but I am quite particular about the person who's teaching it, and not always convinced they really know what's right for a spine. It's like, yeah, I can see that you're very bendy, but I'm not really. And a lot of, I think, especially women's exercise classes are so much more about being thin than being healthy. They're just, you know, much of it is about, you know, how thin is the person? Is she thinner than everybody else? Why are you doing this? To be thin. It's all they want, thin. And it's quite interesting to see there's kind of a new trend going in women, like younger women, about this sort of desire to be strong over thin. But then I've read a few things that suggest that that's just thinness masquerading as strength. Because there is a difference between not wanting to be overweight, because we all know that it's unhealthy to be overweight, and actually striving for some thinness model.
I saw that article, I don't know, about like the stupid little sort of pink weights that women use in the gym, and like just about, you know, you'll kind of use this because I don't want to get too big, and then they'll go and sort of like pick up a pushchair and like kind of do all this stuff, and it's like, and there's no such thing as like you're going to get too big, but so just like having these pointless sort of women's exercise equipment.
I watched last night that there's a BBC documentary guy that, I can't remember his name, Dr. something, who did
Dr. something. No, well done.
He does the truth about, and then there was the truth about fitness I watched last night, and they did various studies, and this is what reminded me, because they did a study where they had women lift a very light weight and a very heavy weight with, you know, left arm, right arm were doing different size weights, and the idea they had to repeat these exercises to fatigue on each side, arm and leg, and after a 6-week period, both limbs had gained equally in strength.
Okay.
Because the point is to go to fatigue. It's not about how much weight you're lifting. And so the ones that did so there was no difference in strength gained, but all the women were like, no, I want to lift the heavier ones because it's faster. Because lifting a light weight for ages, you're just, boring.
So, you know, if we talk about longevity and we talk about technology, well, this thing you said about, it kind of comes back to my sort of nanotech thing, which was, you know, I'll just fix it with technology later. So I just used to smoke a lot, I used to drink a lot, I used to just, you know, that invincibility thing. I was just like, well, it will just get fixed later. It'll be fine. I'll be kind of in an eternal state of like my ideal age once we just figure that out. when I quit drinking was probably the biggest thing ever for my health. Like, I think so many health problems in so many people I know, I feel like just kind of stem back to that alcohol, and maybe not realizing that it's a bit addictive and that it's kind of having knock-on effects. If someone's not going to make it into the gym, it's drinking. If someone's going to eat gross stuff, I always think, like, with drinking, it's not, the alcohol's got calories and this and that, but also it just makes you want like a bacon sandwich really hard.
Bag of chips on the way
fried
home.
chicken, yeah, just I just used to eat so much fried chicken, it was disgusting. I once went to the fried chicken shop at 7 a.m. Have you ever had the last of the lukewarm fried chicken at 7 a.m? It's not nice.
I think that's what I think I mean when I talk about invincibility as well.
Yeah.
Like, I always thought, because when you are young, so when you have a brand new baby and they maybe scratch themselves with their nail or something, you can almost watch the wound heal. It heals
Wow.
so fast because they're just growing and developing at such a pace. And even now I can notice that she's basically 3, that there's, you know, a scab lasts a little bit longer than it did. It's quite funny how the human body's, how it works. It's nice having a child because you've got this little, you've got an in-house documentary.
A little science lab.
Watching it develop. But when you're a teenager, something hurts, you get better quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that contributes massively to hangovers. You know, what hangover? There's that, and all these things where as you get older, like, it's taking a little bit longer to recover from that. It's taking a little bit longer to lose that extra weight. It's taking a little bit, and so I think the invincibility thing for me is about looking after myself. For me, the quality of life. Yes, longevity. You know, I had a child when I was 40. I want to be around for a while if I can. But I want to be around in a way that's active and not in pain and not some doddery old lady who, you know, then becomes a burden. So it's that sort of, you know, I think I have a duty to myself as well to stay as healthy as I can. But I think one thing that's different between you and me is that I don't not drink and I don't not eat chips. You know, I have a slightly...
I had chips yesterday.
Okay, all right. I know you'd eat chips. I'm not judging
Carrot chips, though.
But were they?
Yeah, from Iceland, with some sort of crispy coating on. Sharon's a bad influence on my eating some. No, I'm not really that in. Yeah, it's just sometimes we go for. I mean, it's sort of like kind of healthy, but sort of not really. But,
I think I'm a bit more 80-20 than perhaps you. You know, I don't smoke anymore. I haven't for quite some years now. But probably if I didn't have such an addictive personality where if I smoke, I want to smoke 20 a day, I'd probably...
That's not an addictive personality. That's just cigarettes.
Oh.
That's just what they do. That's
Is that what
you
they...
have
But
one.
yeah, well, I know quite a few people who have one. And
yeah, but then they'll never have less than. Well, we can get into the smoking. So I am from the Alan Carr. I will link to the books because they've been very helpful in my life. Even though I think partly because they're sort of written by someone that reminds me of my grandpa, so it sort of doesn't sort of feel kind of. It feels like it's coming from a place that I grew up respecting.
Right,
so it's like a guy that used to drink a lot, used to do a lot of things, but you know, cigarette, like these addictive things, there's not an addictive personality. It's just a cigarette. The first cigarette wasn't nice, but then it set up a need for the next one as the chemical withdrew and it made you feel uncomfortable. And it's just every single subsequent cigarette is just relieving the previous one. And so that will only get more intense as you kind of develop more of a tolerance. And it's actually like, it was when I realized that kind of alcohol was doing that a little bit with me that I thought, okay, yeah, let's have a look at this. Let's see. Although his book on that is How to Control Alcohol, because I think if it was called How to Quit Alcohol, no one would ever pick it up. But it's just easier to go cold turkey than it is to sort of like it cut down or like do it a little bit. It's just easier to just sort of not do something, especially when it's setting up that kind of withdrawal cycle.
It's interesting, the idea that controlling is harder work than cutting out. How much can I, it's much easier to answer the question in a binary, shall I have a drink, yes or no, than how many drinks shall I have? 1.5. Well, it's a special occasion, I'll have 5. I get that. I've not thought about it that way. What I have not ever discussed with you is how, based on all your investigations, how addictive is alcohol versus cigarettes?
I mean, it's much lower level, but it is ultimately that, like, I read this book that's talking about how alcohol essentially for everyone functions as a sort of addictive thing. And its only real benefit, if you can call it that, is that it reduces fear, which is sort of like has some strengths, but unfortunately it also reduces your ability to kind of perform.
So the Dutch courage thing is factual.
Yeah, like it reduces your anxieties, it reduces your worries about things, but at the same time it reduces your ability to actually deal with something. So if someone pissed comes up to you in a bar, it's like, okay, you're brave enough to do that, but you're also kind of useless to me right now because you can hardly speak. But yeah, like alcohol is implicitly, it's sad. I find it very upsetting that we train our children from a young age to develop a tolerance to alcohol. Like socially, it's something that's like mandated culturally. Like, here is this poisonous addictive substance. Now keep drinking it and being sick until you develop enough of a tolerance that you can kind of get through that, and then just kind of enjoy this relief it gives you from its own effects like a week later. And it's, it can be slow, like, but the fact that you fancy a pint a week after you last had a pint is still that withdrawal cycle to some extent. And but I don't like trying to preach to people about like quitting addictions, because it has to come from inside you. You have to be ready, but I do believe that like cold turkey is absolutely so much easier than trying to control or cut down these things. Especially if you can kind of convince yourself that it doesn't actually have any positive things to it at all. And you can see that, like I see that glass of wine. I'd like a glass of wine with food once in a while. Like Alan Carr does a lot to kind of try and break that one down, because it's the most insidious one. And once you're kind of having the glass of wine, now that's kind of like a gateway to, I might have a beer tonight, But if you can get rid of the least offensive sounding one, then it's just, everything else is just easy. Sorry.
Blimey.
I mean, I'm very opinionated on this, and it's just helped me. I swear I gained 5 years back of my life when I quit drinking. If anyone wants to, that's the other thing with addiction and think like smoking. It's like, by not doing something, you can get more healthy. Well, brilliant. Win-win. Like, it's cheaper and you don't have to do anything. So just by not drinking, I'm suddenly like 5 years younger, and it just made me much more aware of my own health and my body, and like it just made me look into how I can eat more healthily and how I can do other things and start optimizing, which I never felt in a position to do when I was sort of like most nights would be having a beer or something.
For me, I find it very difficult not to sound judgmental when I'm talking about health. I feel like I take responsibility for my health, and I find it difficult when people don't take responsibility for their own health. I then find it difficult to be sympathetic.
Well, what are some of the biggest, like, to me, addiction is a core part of some of the biggest problems with health at the moment, and it's sugar. It's the sugar industry is this huge problem. Which is sort of still kind of getting by under the radar a little bit, which, there's a great talk by, which I can link to, by someone whose name I shall say here.
Robert Lustig.
Who basically talks about, like, in the 80s, 70s, we all decided that saturated fat was the enemy. We kind of demonized that and actually people did stop eating so much saturated fat. That's what happened. Like, everything is marketed as low fat. This, you know, like we did cut down. So why is obesity in America at like epidemic levels? It's because of the sugar, like, which actually, when you look at it, is immensely more damaging than fat ever was. And but they're literally a conspiracy to sort of like, you know, they kind of threw saturated fat as like a sacrificial lamb, and so that the sugar industry could keep doing what it was doing. And if you're not even aware that like they're setting up like, sugar has got such a kind of short withdrawal cycle that you just want to keep eating. It's really hard to stop. And I find it really hard if I've sort of got into the habit every day of having something sweet. It's really hard to get out of that habit. You really feel deprived if you don't get to have a cake the next lunch. But if you just actually like leave it another day, you're kind of, I'm kind of fine. I really think it needs to be addressed as an addiction, and people need to be aware that sugar is at the core of it, really, a lot of the time.
But one of the things I think about in the context of sugar and healthy eating, because I'm a bit of a moderate when it comes to healthy eating. I eat everything, but I mostly eat vegetables. It's like but I do eat everything. There's nothing is off my list particularly. And one of the things though I think about in the context of sugar more so than anything else is that I present cake to myself as some sort of reward or treat. And that's the language. Oh, should we have a treat? Why have I associated something that is so bad for me as some sort of like, congratulations, you have, you know, whatever you've done, because or whatever, you know,
it makes your brain go, ooh, you know, it gives you a thing. But when you have to watch out, when you have to really watch something, and I'm pointing.
You're pointing?
The stuff you really have to watch is when you do the same thing as a treat as you do when you're feeling bad. So I feel miserable. I'm going to eat some cake. I'm going to have a cigarette. Oh, I feel really happy. I've just achieved something. I'm going to have some cake. I'm going to have a cigarette. Like, it's those things that you've really got to kind of keep an eye on and go, I think perhaps this is just working for itself and not for me.
That's quite interesting. Yeah. That's quite cool. I hadn't thought of things like that. So
just as long as you're not eating cake when you feel bad as well, then, you know, I think that's fine. But yeah.
Well, I think I am.
Well, there we go.
I definitely eat sugary things, both in bad and good contexts.
And we all do, you know, and I still haven't managed to kick that one.
And I have this, again, with the child, like, so she's not had, with me, certainly at home, so she'll quite happily eat just natural yoghurt. Because she doesn't really know fruit yoghurt exists. I haven't introduced her. She eats fruit and she eats yoghurt, but she doesn't eat yoghurt that's got sweetened fruit in it. And she eats lots of things that I don't think I've infected her yet with a sweet tooth. But I don't deny her sweet things, because I know a few kids, or a few friends that I had whose parents were, you mustn't eat any chocolate, sweets, whatever, and then as soon as they have gained any independence, they're like, I gotta eat all the sugar. And
it's hard to. Well, we had a very controlled access to sweets, I guess, when we were young. We got 10p a week pocket money, which is how old I am. Imagine when that could still buy you anything.
We were only ever allowed 2 squares of Cadbury's Dairy Milk in any
the most
sitting.
Boring chocolate available.
Well, that was what was at Granny and Grandpa's house. You were not allowed. Did I tell you my grandpa was a pharmacist, and he was very not sugar. Sugar's bad. He was also most pills are bad. But he, if we had cordial, you literally, our Ribena was the palest pink you've ever seen. It's like, it looked like it had waved at the Ribena bottle from a great distance. It's like, what? I want Ribena like other people have Ribena. I want purple Ribena, not pale pink Ribena. But yeah, so we did, our access to sugar was and Coca-Cola was like birthday party.
Don't even. That Coca-Cola is just horrendous. And like that, do you know why you can drink so much of it? Because, well, you want to keep drinking it because they put loads of salt in it to make you keep being thirsty. That's like one of the main ingredients, but they don't even talk about that. And New Coke, and this is going back to this guy's talk, was they upped the salt. And then they changed it they just wanted to put more salt in to make people drink even more of it, and it's horrible.
Insidious.
And I hate that the Coca-Cola brand is not yet as like you should see it the same way you see like Benson and Hedges. Like it's the same level. But yeah, another thing, like those, it's annoying how those drugs and those addictive things, they get the most love when it comes to presentation as well. So you go to a cake shop and who doesn't want one of those beautiful things with a thing on it and a cherry and a strawberry and some special cream and it's been made into some little curls and twists and it's all these different colours. Who doesn't want that? But you don't lavish that attention on a cucumber.
No, you don't.
I think there should be laws around like calorie counts, even just on food. I just can't believe the hoops they make you jump through, the maths they make you do to try and figure out how many calories are in this packet that you know you're going to eat in one go.
Yeah,
like,
and they always
just,
need that
anyway.
whole portion thing. 99 calories per portion.
And then
Portion
you're looking
is
on the
one
packet for the
mouthful.
weight. Like it's like, where's the weight? I can't find the weight. You're telling me this weight and this weight, neither of which is related to the actual weight.
Yeah.
Like there needs to be an EU law that we will soon be able to ignore that says you just got to put how many in the packet
Yeah.
on the front.
Yeah.
If we want to break it up into 3 portions, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. I agree. So,
Well,
what else?
It sounded like you
So-
you wanted to talk about this sort of alternative stuff.
Because I've had an unexplained problem, and that's its diagnosis. Unexplained. And you're like, well, first of all, bro, I hate that. Unexplained. Fuck do you mean by unexplained? And then, but then I'm willing to then, in those scenarios, okay, either medicine, science medicine hasn't got far enough into it to have, got further than where I am. As far as everything they know so far, I've ticked all the boxes, but then there's this bit that they don't know about yet. So in the absence of, rather than do nothing, I'm very happy to explore alternatives or, medicines that don't necessarily claim to cure, but claim to look at a problem in a different way, because it's no different to the way I'd apply solving a design problem. It's like, okay, the things that I know already just don't seem to fix this. Let's try and sidestep and come up with some different inspiration. What other mental models are there? What other analogues, what can we use?
And sometimes just putting you in a room and having a bit of theatre and making you feel special for an hour. Like, when's your GP going to do that for you? Never.
Yeah. The word theatre makes me smile a bit, because I know somebody whose wife is an acupuncturist, and he goes to they go to a festival every year, and he's thinking of doing an actual kind of like art installation that plays on the theatre of alternative therapies. Right. But there is definitely something about the time when you go and see these non-GP people, and that includes a counsellor or a psychotherapist, all these people who are just listening to you and paying attention to you and helping you understand what are you upset about, or what actually hurts. And I value that enormously. And I there's a point at which I don't really care to analyse whether or not the thing is a placebo or not. Doesn't really matter to me. I can suspend my disbelief for a bit.
I actually do have very little patience for a lot of the kind of Western medical tradition as well. Sometimes it's just so sort of fixated on, hammer away. It's not in the habit of stepping back.
No.
And kind of looking, because it hasn't got time for a start, but it's really kind of become trapped in this corner of. But also I think I've been very lucky that I haven't really needed very much from it. Like I've always been pretty healthy. I think I've got away with it somehow. I've never really had a big hospital emergency. I've never had some unexplained ailment.
Yeah.
Maybe mentally it's been a bit more of a thing, but and and I've sort of had to figure that out. But physically, I think I've been pretty lucky.
But I mean, also there's this thing with that sort of the medical medicine with the pills and the antibiotics. You know, there's been a lot of over-prescribing of things like antibiotics. Yes, they do cure a thing, but if you use them for the wrong things, so there's a much
use them
more,
too much,
or use them too much.
You know,
Same with anything.
stop working.
In plastic, antibiotics, we've sort of got this terrible habit of humans who go, oh, that works. Let's do that.
Just see how far we can go with it, and then have to pull back. Let's just quickly say, vaccinations, all you vaccination skeptics, it was one disproven article. Can you stop being so irresponsible and just read up on this properly? Because I'm sick of hearing about more and more people, sorry, I'm actually yelling, more and more parents like refusing to vaccinate their children. It's like, that shit works. And if you stop doing it, you can get away with that because everyone else is. But the more people stop doing it, we're just going to have these terminal infections are just going to come back like they used to be around. We've cured it, and you are standing in the way. You're going to bring it back because you don't know anything. So, and that's definitely not going to persuade anyone. But like, that's how angry it makes me when I see this.
I was going to say, this was one of the things I promised myself I would get in there. I have vaccinated my child against everything that I can possibly vaccinate her against, including paying some extra for things that I just think that because the NHS doesn't offer them for free, but other countries do. I'm like, yep, she can have that as well, because that is to me that is a very, and I do have this, I know lots of people, I do see alternative therapists, and I do engage at a light level occasionally with a debate about with an anti-vaxxer. You know who you are, but I do it in a, and so for example, I personally cannot make rubella antibodies. So I've had loads of vaccines, in fact. I've had the MMR loads of times in an attempt to get rubella antibodies, because if you get rubella when you're pregnant, your child will undoubtedly be born with severe problems. But as I can't make those antibodies, one of the things I was terrified of when pregnant was that there would be a rubella outbreak because there are so many people who don't vaccinate their children, and that my unborn child would be damaged because herd immunity had been lost.
You do not see anyone being anti-vaccine that isn't coming from a place of utter privilege, in my experience. Yeah. And that is poisonous, and you're killing people. You're killing children, frankly.
It's like, you know, but maybe this is how the planet gets saved.
Well, maybe. Darwin. I was also going to say, like, I saw a recent, like, another TED talk about, like, longevity, and, like, the second thing for longevity improvements is flu vaccines. I haven't had any flu vaccines, but yeah, like, you can plot this on a graph. You want to live longer, have the vaccines. Like, if you don't,
what age? Because on that subject, I
think older. Yeah,
I was going to check that because, you know, there's been all these conversations about. I haven't looked it up because I had the flu vaccine when I was pregnant, and my child has had the flu vaccine now that she's old enough to have it. But I didn't think I was of an age that needed it. But then I listened to some Australian medic being interviewed talking about how some very healthy young people died in the Australian flu outbreak last year. So I was like, oh, should I have had the flu vaccine? Also, being self-employed, I don't have time to be ill. So it's like, maybe I should do that. But yes, so
that's true. That was something I noticed in an office. Like, I was in this office and I was like, there's a lot of Lemsips around this day. And like the other contractor was like, yeah, well, we're all contractors, so we just,
keep coming in.
We're power through it.
add another dimension to the argument, I was speaking a couple of weeks ago to somebody who wants to create a tool and a body of work around sort of collecting evidence from defined studies to explore whether some of these alternative therapies work on a particular thing. So pick a symptom, an illness, do a controlled study, report back. Because there are lots of these alternative things that just don't get researched in the same way that really, pills do.
Yeah, well, they haven't grown out of scientific research.
No.
That doesn't mean that if you scientifically research them, you wouldn't find some benefits.
No, and it's things like, herbs, for example. A lot of medicines are made out of herbs, or sort of like some active ingredient within a herb. So, and one of the reasons I think I've grown up quite open to these alternative things is because certainly, my Herzegovina a lot, they're very big on sage tea. If you've got a sore throat, gargle with that, which apparently has antiseptic properties, or peppermint tea if you've got your tummy's upset, or chamomile tea if you're not, you don't know. So a lot of these herbs have been around and been used to help you deal with the symptoms of not feeling very well.
We've got a list here of the top 10 factors in longevity.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we can finish on this.
Go on.
So Susan Pinker's TED Talk, and I blogged about this one because it was very interesting. Down the bottom is clean air. The next one is hypertension, something. I don't know what that is. We'll have to go and look.
High blood pressure?
I guess. Lean versus overweight. Like if you're not overweight, you're going to do better. Exercise. These are predictors of longevity. Then exercise, cardiac rehab, flu vaccine. Then above that is quitting drinking. Above that is quitting smoking. And then above that is close relationships. And above that is social integration. So
social integration is number one.
Yep, in longevity. So, in fact, I have been trying to engage in small talk more because now I'm like, okay, every 5 minutes I spend talking about nothing is actually adding 10 minutes to my life.
You are such... Oh, you weirdo.
Well, it's a way of looking at it. But, I mean, isn't that, that's something, right? If you just look at it, them's the facts, guys, apparently.
Them's the facts, apparently. Social integration is... So, I didn't realise that. Because what I do know, for example, is that loneliness is a massive problem in our urban society. What did you say, clean air? What was above clean air?
Hypertension.
Oh, hypertension.
Something. Hypertension RX, it says. I can't remember what
so for example, there's a charity in Brighton called Impetus. I don't know if they have branches elsewhere, but who last Christmas they had a drive to get people to they run a befriending service, because in a city of, I think we're 270,000 people, last Christmas 40,000 people would be lonely at Christmas.
Yeah,
that's a big number.
Yeah. And as you're getting older as well, it's getting worse. It's that sort of loneliness and social isolation thing that is just so unhealthy and unhelpful. So whether you're just going to meet up with people and argue over things like Brexit, vaccinations, these are all still good social interactions, and you should go out whether you agree or disagree. Don't let people make you so angry that you don't talk to them. What does she say about people who like to go around their friend's house for a fag? Well, then real life is very complicated, isn't it?
It is. Real life is more complicated than lists. Damn it.
Sometimes. But I had a bit of a on reflection.
Oh yeah.
Thing. That bit last week where it's can you think of anyone you consider successful that isn't very rich, has been playing on my mind, and I'm not sure I actually really can. And even if it's people, even if it's a musician that just the fact that they're making money, as just the fact they're making their living from music is, still comes back to money, and that's why I consider them successful. I don't like that I don't seem to be able to think of anyone successful that isn't rich, and maybe I do want to be rich.
I also felt that we could put more effort into having a list of people who aren't rich but are successful. But you don't hear about them, do you?
Work on it.
Work on it.
No, because everyone goes, oh well, look at you. That's how you figure it out, isn't it? Like,
rich people can afford PR. That's what it is.
That's true.
Maybe we should start a PR firm for people who aren't rich but are successful.
Okay.
What my on reflection
to make them rich.
Yeah, my on reflection thing, if anything, was this whole thing that everything we talk about is in some way related. We've kind of gone for these grand topics, but we didn't go for them. But we've picked off topics. But if any one of them is completely out of kilter in your life, then none of the others feel good. If your definition of success is a bit, if you're not meeting your definition of success, it's very hard to be happy. If you've, got, if you've got
bad technology,
if you're worried about,
if
you've got bad money, it's like this kind of trying to keep everything in balance is hard work. There are 2 news items today that relate closely politics and technology. One news item today was that there is basically alt-right hate content rises on the internet faster because political policy is about removing Islamic hate content. So Islamist hate content gets removed from the internet at a far higher rate than alt-right, and alt-right is kind of largely being ignored because it's not on anyone's political radar. Because at the moment, whilst we can all talk about those Islamists that are coming over here and blowing us up, we are not, nobody's going, those alt-right people producing hate content, he's not getting the political currency to be attacked. That's one thing. Another thing was that study, the NSPCC, talking about children's access to technology, and their first run at it, the expert who made the recommendations called Tanya Byron, and she I can't remember people's names, but only if they were on the news this morning. And I remember of some other TV show, but she made some recommendations, and the suggestion was that they should be done on a sort of voluntary basis or a best practice basis. But the conclusion is now that if they're not turned into policy and enshrined in law, nobody's going to adhere to these things that protect our children in this new technology world. So you can't get away from politics. Politics is what influences everything. It influences, whoever's lobbying the politicians is what drives the influence, how you're...
But that's why I always thought the people lobbying were the ones in power. So rather, I always looked at it that way. But it just seems like it's got screwed up. Let's not
do politics version 2
rabbit hole just yet. Thanks for listening to our podcast this week. If you like the podcast, you can find our website, grandpodcast.com. You can email us, hello@grandpodcast. And you can make Ivanka very happy by following us at Podcast Grand on Twitter.
That's true. You can find me, Ivanka Majic. I am at Ivanka on Twitter. I'm ivanka.blog.
So all the music on this thing I made on my own, mostly. So my website's michaelforrestmusic.com, and you can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please, I don't know how much of the ranting I left in, but if I did, then let's get into it on Twitter. I'm not scared. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.